a society to retain its standards, it needs a lot of energy. Buildings consume 40% of the energy across the globe. So that's a massive amount. And if you think that if we could maybe save 20-30% of the energy in buildings which have massive waste and inefficiency, then from that side of things we could make an enormous difference. And that's the basis by which IES was founded. How could we make buildings better? I think as far as climate change, it's been interesting what's happened over the last decade. What I saw was the biggest threat was not coming from maybe running out of fossil fuels. The biggest threat was climate change and the implications of that. One of the problems we've got today is the fact that carbon emissions are still increasing. And although people are saying that they're reducing their carbon emissions, we're not actually seeing that in figures. In the last 2 years, carbon emissions have been 2.5 parts per million increase. Now, people talk about 450 parts per million as being the critical level, that if we go above that, we will not manage to stay within the 2 degrees change, and we're increasing by 2.5 every year. It means that we'll only get 16 years before we hit 450. Now, I don't know about you, but for me, that's dangerous, and that's not giving us a lot of contingency. If you look at throughout the whole of civilizations, society is built on energy. What's happening is that we take energy for granted. You take energy away and we go back to the Stone Age. Okay, in order for us to keep the same standard of living and to allow other societies to have the same standard of living, that's going to require more energy or much more efficient energy. We've got to look at moving forward. It's some better complement between renewables and fossil fuels and energy efficiency. But when it comes down to it, the main thing we've got to do is look at energy efficiency. So let's start saving energy today for the future generations. One of the things that we felt was important to do was to try and quantify the difference that we make. That we have got thousands of people around the world using our software on a daily basis, and they're using our software to make a big difference to the buildings that they've got. Both us and mainly our users have managed to have a collective impact, and that's something that we can quantify. We've actually saved to date about 28 power stations being built. We've been looking at saying, how can we look at the life cycle of a building? Now we're looking at saying, how can we have that within the life cycle of a community, right? So it's this wider, broader and longer term perspective that we're looking at. So we see communities as a campus, it could be a city, it could be a country, it could be a continent, it doesn't matter. So this new system that we're looking at creating, we term it as the Intelligent Communities Life Cycle. And the reason for that is that we're talking about the whole life cycle of a community, from the initial concepts, the initial master plan, all the way through to the operation of the buildings within inside that, and also having the energy supply to be all self-contained, so that community becomes a unit. And if we can get these units to have zero energy balance, then we can then start to build societies that would make a difference. If we can make a big difference globally, right, we've got to make sure that our technology gets embedded everywhere. So what we're trying to develop things are the way that every building could be controlled with our software, and we'd be able to predict ahead what's going to happen. We would minimise the amount of energy that house would use, but then that would spread to other buildings, and it'd spread to the community, it'd be spread to the country, it'd be spread to the world. It may well be that in some place like North Africa, there might be a lot of PV and they could be collecting that energy, but they might be shipping some of that across to Asia because it's at night time there. We can create more balance within society. So my objective is to try and do what we can as a company to effect that change, to have the technology that we can look after the built environment globally. As a species, we've done marvellous things. Of all the species that have lived on Earth, right, we're the only species that can build museums. The only species that actually have invented airplanes that understand how the planets work, how the solar system works, and where we sit amongst all of that. So wouldn't it be tragic that through blatant stupidity, we ruin it all by creating climate change, which destroys us? Because the planet will survive, the planet will recover, but we as a species might not. And having been the only ones that can do this, to fling that all away seems to me to be tragic.